Hello, my name is Richard Rudd, and if you don't know me, I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm founder of a system called the GENEKEYS, a synthesis. And as a spiritual teacher over the years, the decades, I have noticed many patterns coming and going, both in myself and in the forces and energies and people I've met in the world at large. And some of these forces, you might categorize them, they fall into the realm of what we might call spiritual ego. And, there are many traps on any spiritual path. And so I've decided to categorize some of the ones I've noticed and share them with you. And the purpose of doing this is twofold. Firstly, because it helps to clarify in me as a teacher which ones that I may be personally kind of fall victim to, let's say, and therefore gain clarity around those, but also for others, so that you can hold these up as a mirror to yourself and begin to look and see, well, which ones might apply to me, and that hopefully can be an inspirational and useful checklist here. So there's a number of them. I've identified 18. I'm sure there are many more, and I encourage you to dig in and find them yourselves. Because there are layers of this ego, especially when you get more and more refined in your spiritual understanding, then the patterns become subtler and subtler. So I've kind of named them, and I want to start with the first one: spiritual materialist. The spiritual materialist, and this is really about the leader or the master. Many leaders, what we do is we build credentials. Like I personally wrote a big, thick GENEKEYS book, and it's very impressive, to some people, and so we build these credentials, and or maybe we had a big experience at some point, or maybe someone spent 20 years in a monastery. That all these things build the story and the credentials of, or you're in a lineage, and you're part of a lineage. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of those things, writing books or any of those things. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we build. One builds this story, and you could be a life coach, and then you write a book or whatever. In any situation where you are guiding or teaching others, this spiritual materialism can enter in. It can become a trap. It's quite a common one, because what happens is you get recognition. You get recognition. Sometimes you get adoration. You get put on a pedestal. You get seen as the healer, the savior, the master. All these kind of things might happen. And you have to be obviously super careful with that, because you can be trapped by the glamour of spiritual fame, or chasing spiritual fame, or just, that deep appreciation that people will have when you offer them a service, or especially something that touches their heart or their soul very deeply. So it's easy to be trapped by that glamour, by the glamour of that kind of worship or adoration or recognition. But it all serves a purpose as well. It all serves a purpose and there are many teachers out there, and many people offering many things, especially nowadays. It seems like everyone is at it, and there are many hucksters, there are many tricksters out there, whose intentions are not as clear, and perhaps as some others. So there are authentic ones and voices, and there are less authentic voices, and they all form this kind of canvas, this rich canvas. And the purpose of it is to allow us, you could see, to hone our discernment. So oftentimes you follow a person, or you go to a person, and then and in the beginning you maybe put them on a pedestal, and then they fall off that pedestal. It's probably going to happen at some point, and that's a very valuable journey, a part of the journey. And this is the backdrop of all spiritual journeys, and you're very lucky if you find a teacher who is absolutely crystal clear, and you can just stay with them all the time if that's your path. But many of us, we're touching lots of different things and being influenced by lots of different teachers and teachings these days. And so there's even more need for this fine level of discernment. But we learn by trial and error. So the spiritual materialist is basically, but it can be both the follower, it can be the leader, it can be anyone. It's the whole racket. And I want to just share that, this is we all fall victim to this or prey to this in one way or another. And so it is the one to really look for, spiritual materialism. The second one is the spiritual victim. The spiritual victim is more of a follower. They can be people that blindly follow without question. Everything my teacher says is right. And I have to say that, that's not a negative thing. That can be a very powerful thing. To have absolute faith in your teacher is an incredibly powerful thing. And so there have been instances, I've heard a story by Osho, for instance, where he tells of where a genuine seeker follows an inauthentic teacher, a master, who isn't for real, who's faking, but because of the level of the devotion of the devotee, they kind of have the experience of transcendence, even though it was a false teacher. So there's a lovely message in that. So sometimes also we have to leave our teachers behind, and again, it's a level of discernment. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Depends on the teacher. There may be perfect teachers and there may be perfect followers. But if a teacher is true to their nature, then they would welcome you to transcend them. They would want to give you a lift up. They would want you to go beyond them. And if they don't, then there's a question around that often when we follow a teacher or a teaching, we get to this point where a part of us wants to expand even further. And that's a powerful phase. There's a powerful thing to come to. And sometimes it's not just about a teacher. Sometimes it's a whole set of teachings or philosophies that we've come to from great teachers or, that kind of thing. But we are called to stretch even beyond some of those incredible wisdoms that have come from the past and from our teachers. And so part of this is not to fall victim to the lineage or to the teaching, but to be ready and available to actually stretch and see if you maybe are called to go beyond, not necessarily the teacher, but the teaching. So something to consider, not to fall victim to, a set of credentials out there or a set of teachings that then hold you in a kind of more closed circuit way of thinking. Third one is the spiritual escapist. The spiritual escapists, and I was one of these once, are the up and out. I call them, up and out. It's the journey up and out. We're trying to get out. This is my last life. This is what they say. This is what these people will say. This is my last life. It may be, but that's the kind of thing you might hear. I'm here to escape samsara. I'm here to attain nirvana. And the trap here can be trying to escape. That's the trap, not the teachings, but trying to escape. There are subtler layers to this as well. In the Advaita tradition, there's this set of truths that come out that there is nothing to do. There is no need for spiritual practice. You're already enlightened. So, and there's deep truth to that. But that insight, that wisdom has to kind of come when the fruit drops from the tree. And if you're just still a seed, you can't kind of force that process. And you might look at someone or hear someone and their fruit has dropped from the tree. And yet you're the seed, but you can't suddenly jump to be the fruit yourself. And so I've seen, some people will stop there, and it's kind of a relief. You're like, oh, I can stop. I don't have to seek anymore. I'm just going to stop. What a relief. No more searching. And actually if you've been searching for a while and then you suddenly get to that and then you go, oh, I'm just going to let it all go. That relief can give you a sense of incredible expansion that you could easily mistake for awakening. Right, so the question is, have you earned that stage? Is it a state or a stage? Because a realized person, because a realized person said it doesn't mean that you've realized it. You may need many more years of searching before you reach that stage, even though you resonate with the truth. So if it is a stage, it doesn't go away. That's the point. It doesn't go away. So beware of the pattern of the spiritual escapist, always trying to get up and out and away, as opposed to down and in. See, I'm a down and in teacher. That's what I'm interested in, is bringing the spiritual realizations into the body, into the form, into the world, into this, not escaping. And this is my last life. I don't want to be here anymore. It's here. Be here fully. Be here so much that you would never want to not be here. Then you're really here. Then you're truly present in the body and in the form. That's powerful. That's empowerment. Number 4, spiritual extremist. The spiritual extremist. The spiritual extremist is the one that's addicted to the high. We get addicted to the highs. Whether it's Kundalini yoga or plant medicine or there are all kinds of things that help us attain those highs. Deep, long, consistent meditation practices, chanting, all kinds of things that take us into that elevated state of consciousness that's so beautiful, that connects us to our higher self. And yet that can also become a trap. That can also become an addiction. And you can get really tight on the inside. And spiritual revelation, as I understand it, it most often arrives to the balanced one. It's what Buddha called the middle way. Siddhartha, in his story of the Buddha, he heard this musician one day say, if the string is too tight, it will snap. If it's too loose, it will not play. He was talking about his musical instrument. And Buddha heard the fisherman, too loose, too tight, it will snap the fishing line. Too loose, it will sag and you won't catch the fish. So there are these stories that concern this, like if you're too extreme, if you're too tight, then, you create the opposite. You can burn out. And so it's really, you want to be careful of extremes, and having said that, there's always, there's no laws here. Like for some people, those extremes are correct, but there are probably few people, there's real ascetics, people who are really drawn to the ascetic paths, and it's correct for them. And, I guess also I'd ask, what's the hurry? What's the hurry? One great teacher said, enlightenment is not in front of you, it's behind you. If you slow down, maybe it'll catch you up. So things to think about when we get too tight, too intense. Number 5, I think it is the spiritual provocateur. These are people that love to challenge. They love to challenge all the different spiritual paths. There's sort of there's a pride in it. I say how it is. I'm a rebel. This is actually a subtle identification in being a spiritual rebel. Anywhere the ego can identify, anywhere. So these can be people that love to debase or debunk the views and paths of others. And yet there's a beauty in the diversity of paths. There's a beauty even in paths that we kind of think are wrong paths, or paths that lead nowhere, or dead-end paths. Why would you stop someone going down a dead end? They might find something amazing down there. Let them find that dead end. Let them come back. Let them find another path. Even paths that seem very extreme, as I just mentioned, or just plain crazy, they still have their viability as steps or rungs on the path, on a greater path. So all paths can be allowed. And sure, it's good to challenge spiritual inauthenticity at times, but it's all about doing it with kindness. Sometimes provoking can be part of a deeper pathology that's rooted in one's own deeper unprocessed trauma. that hasn't been looked at, that hasn't been dealt with. And that's why you look out and you're looking to provoke out there. So self-inquiry is always to look back inside when we haven't really looked deeply within, then, we can weaponize spiritual knowledge. It just becomes a part of our projection field, of our blame. And we're looking for that reaction, that response from someone else, to give us that sense of, I exist, and it's a common thing, So, and if someone's doing it to you, I've been on the end of it many times. I think, how you deal with that is also a great learning, and eventually you may find a deeply compassionate way to deal with it. And again, it serves a purpose. Number 6, the spiritual dogmatist or Puritan is a little bit similar to the provocateur, can be subtler. This is a bit more superior. My teacher or my teaching transcends all others. Here's another thing. It's not all love and light and unicorns. I often hear that. It's that kind of. It's not all love and light. Some teachings are like, my thing always is like when I hear that, it's like, well, I love unicorns. What's wrong with them? The provocateur attacks, the dogmatist defends. So it can be more of a passive aggressive pattern. This is a pattern that uses the knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, to deepen their defensive view. So these are people that might look out into the world, and there's a tendency to kind of look at the world and go, oh, well, those people are all muggles, or they're in their not self, or they haven't found a way yet. Those GENEKEYS people are lost souls. I've heard that I've heard people say that about the GENEKEYS community that I, represent. What a thing to say, to condemn an entire community. It's amazing when you see these patterns at work, and the other side is like, our teacher is the world savior. Anywhere you see one spiritual view attacking another spiritual view, you can almost guarantee it's rooted in maintaining some kind of dogma. Otherwise, why would it bother you? Why would it bother you? Just let it go. Unless, of course, you're actually attacking something that actually harms people or hurts people. Then that would be a viable. I would say that would be a viable form of the only viable kind of form of really having a go at something else, challenging it deeply if it's actually harming people. Am I on 7? The spiritual cynic, the spiritual skeptic, the spiritual cynic. The cynic goes on looking for flaws, and of course the cynic finds flaws everywhere. That's all they find. If you're a cynic, that's what you look for, that's what you find. If you are a cynic, then hearing this probably won't change you in the slightest. So this is really advice for people who are dealing with cynics and who are dealing with this energy when it comes towards you. And many times that is another great challenge, that we have to learn. I recommend what I think the Native Americans call duck's back medicine. The water rolls off the duck's back. It comes to you and you just let it glide off. Take some practice. It comes at you, you maybe feel an emotion, but then you just let it slide off, and then you respond as best as you can with compassion. There's no need to defend your view. If you have a view that you need to defend, it's a slippery slope. Your role isn't to defend a view. Your role is to model the view in the world, to model it. I think about, in my pathway as a teacher, like my GENEKEYS Amazon reviews, because when you put something out there, you put your head above, you're like, you open yourself up to all these cynical, skeptical views that come in, and challenges, some of them really good challenges, and many people, what they've said I've read at times about my own teachings is the suggestion that I'm in it for the money, that I'm a huckster, like the projection that, you buy the GENEKEYS book and then you buy my things, but actually it's all a bit of a trick to get you to buy more, that kind of thing. And it's like, whoa, it's not easy to read that and hear that, especially when you kind of bend over backwards to make it all really affordable. So, it's like you have to kind of realize that, for instance, when we go onto those Amazon things, if we're buying any product or we're looking at a hotel or something, or, somewhere thinking of going, and we look at the 5 stars and the 4 stars and the 1 stars, isn't it amazing that we look at the 1 stars and there may be 2 or 3 and then there may be 1,000 5 stars, but we read the 1 star and we give it way more weight than the 1,000 5 stars. Isn't that amazing? How much weight we give to the cynical, to the skeptical, and it, it's interesting to us, of course, but I just think it's worth bearing in mind, like we feed our own distrust sometimes, we do. And so, things to think about. We're not here to defend. I mean, I realized when I looked again once at my book online, it was on Amazon, and I saw that the most reviews, the most kind of liked review was a negative review. I was like, oh my word. And I thought, shall I do something about that? Because then people are coming on and they're seeing only the bad review first. And I'm like, I could even get all my friends and people just to kind of like another review, but I'd like, that would be really false, that would be terrible. So I just kind of thought, well, actually, maybe it's meant to be. Maybe it's meant to be that way because then it allows people's discernment to decide. So if they read a negative review first, let them read it. Let them discern. And then actually, that could be a good thing because then you'll get more authentic people involved in the teaching. So you can always turn it round for yourself. That's why I'm just telling you my stories and of what the things that have come my way. And it may be common to many of us at different ways, like how we handle those kind of views coming at us. Another one that's a little bit connected is I'm going to stop numbering them because I'll lose my place, is this what I call the spiritual sniper. And these are views or comments or critical things that come at you from the undergrowth and then vanish. And it's really interesting because those energies, and I won't call them people because these are not people. These are just energies, and they're energies that move through us at different times. We manifest them, and then maybe they move past us, and then we move on. But so the sniper energy comes at you, and it can be in many things in life. This isn't just spirituality, but they actually don't want resolution. So at times I've noticed like people have complained and stuff, and I've offered them refunds, full refunds. I've offered them dialogues. I've offered to meet me online and discuss this live. And no one they've never responded, any of these people, and I'm a bit of a warrior, I'm quite adept at swordplay and I enjoy a good challenge, but often these energies don't want that. They just want to do it from the undergrowth. They want to have their say and then be gone, so if you are one of those people and you're watching this, meet me face to face, say it to my face. Don't have some backbone. Come and meet me. I'll meet you. I'll listen to you. And if you can't come, if these energies don't come out, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. You just let it go. Just let it go. So be brave, be bold, and if someone challenges you, meet their challenge. Invite them to kind of, you've got nothing to lose. You've got nothing to hide. Listen to them. Show them some respect. Show them some compassion. And model it. You get to model it. You might get angry. That's fine. You can get angry. That might be part of the process. So, the sniper. Beware the snipers. Spiritual conspiracist. Spiritual conspiracist. Love these. They're all over the place. aliens, Illuminati, reptilians, government, Bill Gates, 5G, or whatever it is, where the conspiracy is, the conspiracist tries to get you to believe in it. And if you don't believe in it, you become one of the victims. So in other words, you have to believe in it, otherwise you're a victim. And so the problem with this view, with a conspiracist, is it doesn't allow people to just believe what they want. So like, if I want to take the vaccine, I'll just take the vaccine. Let me take it if I want to take it. I don't need to have all the theory. It's like, trust me to make my own decision. Trust me to make my own decision. And having said that, there's often a grain of truth in conspiracy theories. Sometimes a lot of truth. So the tester of the conspiracist is, if the conspiracist moves from one to the next, to the next, to the next, or they believe in a whole web of conspiracies, then I think that could be like open up to some deeper probing. But if it's often just, if it's one thing, then that seems to, that they're like, I really want you to understand this. I really want you to kind of be more in I'd like to share with you that you need more information here. That's fine. But not everything can be a conspiracy. As Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And often we have this tendency to transfer our blame onto them. I've done a recording about this. Them. It's like the third person plural. Them is a really handy place to transfer our blame for some unresolved trauma inside ourselves. So again, really interesting to look at, and it's good to challenge the status quo. It is, it really is. But I would recommend not beginning with the assumption that all governments, for example, are out to get you. I wouldn't begin with that assumption. And that's often what the conspiracist does. They begin with that assumption. So beware conspiracies, and this whole world. Listen to it, learn from it. Again, all of these is about identification. If you identify yourself as that, then you've fallen into a trap. If you can wear that as a cloak, and you go, well, I am, this is just something I'm wearing. This is an opinion I've picked up, and I'm playing with it, but it's not me. I'm not identified to it. Then you can play in the game. This is the same with all of these. Next one, the spiritual fantasist. Spiritual fantasists. These are the people who are lost in unicorns and multidimensional 29-strand DNA and the 24th chakra. And, my last life I was Mary Magdalene or King Arthur. And, all of this stuff. It can be easily you can get so easily lost in spirituality. And there's a real difference. There's a fine line here. Every single one of these, there's a fine line. You might be getting that. It's a fine line. So I don't want you to think that I am judging any pattern, because there's always a fine line. There's a process I call magical thinking. Magical thinking, and magical thinking is powerful. Like indigenous people employ magical thinking, for example. And it's a way of looking at the universe through the right brain in a holistic way that uses the imagination and the intuition together. And it's incredibly powerful for accessing, deep truth, but it also can become a spiritual bypass. I remember a guy once who was he did this tapping technique on the spine. And I was looking down his list of each point in the spine, had a different access to something. And I was looking down his list as he was doing this with me. And I said, can I look at your list and see what all those points do? And one of the points was Buddhahood. I was like, wow, you can just tap a point and you get Buddhahood. And he was like, yeah. I said, oh, can you give me that one? He said, yeah, sure. It's like, tap the pattern and it's magically gone. Trauma is trauma. It's not over in a second. It needs to be moved through. You've got to, The shadow is the shadow. You've got to go deep into it. You've got to be in it. You've got to feel it. There's no shortcuts when it comes to this work. There's no shortcuts. You know, and so you've got to be really careful with being swept away with all kinds of wild ideas and then losing your practicality and your connection to the earth and to, you know, basic kind of, in being in your body. So again, hold things lightly. Think magically, but don't get caught in identifying with those concepts and ideas. How are we doing? The spiritual savior. The spiritual savior, and sometimes also the spiritual imposer. You know, this is the person or the energy that their healing technique offers all the answers. You know, it's like these are people that can always offer others healings or readings, and often what they're looking for is subtly looking for recognition. You know, because there's an over keenness to help. You know, and there's the sort of person you go and have a reading with them and you're there for 3 hours, you know, and they overshare. They can't stop. They have so much. They want to share. And they can also be people that's, you know, my diet is perfect for everyone. You know, this diet, I've got this diet. Everyone should do this diet. And so there's often that kind of overwhelming others with help. And so there's a lack of boundaries sometimes. You know, another good one is trying to convert your partner. You know, you're into something really deep, but your partner's not into it at all. They're not into spirituality at all. And yet, and you feel uncomfortable about that. And so part of you wants to convert them. Just let them be. Let them be. If they don't pick it up, they won't pick it up. They don't need to. Surely you can just love them. You know, and another one is my guidance says you should do this. My guidance says you should wear white or you should eat this. You know, that's a little bit, you know, to be careful. You know, you need to listen to my guides. And that takes away your own authority. You know, those are energies that want you to be dependent on them. And so be careful around your intuitions. And sometimes that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to someone else's guidance at all. But it's just like, be careful, be aware, be alert, pay attention. You have a very good intuition. Your intuition is mostly for you, mostly. It's for you so that you can discern what's right for you. And yes, you can go and find someone else who has a very sharp intuition and they can be a great help and support to you. But be careful. You know, because you have your own intuition as well. The spiritual narcissist. I know this is kind of hard because there's so many. The narcissist, this is the person that knows so much spiritual stuff, you know, and yet they have no clue how to kind of own their own stuff. And little humility or self-inquiry. So there's a lot of people out with a lot of knowledge, but they haven't yet really embarked on a deep self-inquiry. You know, so what happens is that that's an energy that will project out spiritual dramas. And again, these people are unlikely to see this pattern in themselves unless they've had some epiphany. Yeah, so often they're energies that we have to deal with. And how do we deal with them? And the real thing is just take what you need for yourself from all these energies. Any of these energies that come towards you, just take what you need for yourself. It's for your growth. You know, the other person's growth is not your concern. It's not in your control. Otherwise, you get into the spiritual savior. You know, you just take what you learn for yourself. That's the great boon here. Spiritual pleaser. Spiritual pleasers. Spiritual pleaser is always gentle, always smiling, always yielding, slightly lacking in backbone, you know, needs to sound a battle cry a bit, needs a bit of warrior. You know, over listening. Is that possible? I think so. To over listen. You know, be careful for this one. Spiritual pleaser. Don't need to say much more about that. The spiritual tourist. The spiritual tourist. Spiritual tourist never settles. There are lots of these around today. I was one. Not so much now. You know, books, courses, you know, doing all these different things. You know, it's like, I'm amazed when I put out like courses and retreats, percentage of people that buy them, the retreats, and then never show up. Like they just like sign up and then they never show up. You're like, wow, what's the energy that does that? And I can understand if someone, you know, something happens in their life and they, you know, but they never asked for their money back or anything like that. They just like booked it because it was something they did, but then they never did it, which is sad in a way. And so in a way, the spiritual tourist, the lesson for the spiritual tourist is, you know, if you dig if you're looking for water under the ground, if you dig lots of shallow wells in lots of different places, you never get down to the water table. Whereas if you choose one spot and you dig your well deep there and you keep digging in that place, you will eventually get to the water. So nice metaphor really to think about with the spiritual tourist. And it's a phase as well. These are phases of our evolution, of our spiritual journey. You know, it's like when you're beginning something, you may try lots and lots of different things. So it's fine. Again, it's fine. All these are fine. And yet at some point, you're going to need to focus and really dig that well deep. And that's when, you know, things will really start to kind of open up for you. The spiritual comedian. The spiritual comedian is someone that always deflects depth or pain using humor or perhaps false modesty, you know, and they're really frustrating, you know, because they won't let you fully connect with them because they keep bypassing, you know, you using their humor. And so, you know, you've got, you know, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, you can call them on it and they'll probably just make that into a joke. But maybe they will also, you know, it's always worth calling someone on their patterns if you can be compassionate and kind and if it feels appropriate. And yeah, that's a deflection technique that people use when they don't want to feel something, or they're not able to fully connect with you or look you deeply in the eye. And again, humor's wonderful, and it's a deep part of the spiritual path, and you need a balance in it between humor and seriousness. You know, so too much of one, again, it's like veering you off into the path of the extremist. So a balance of seriousness, be seriously funny. You know, that's the key is balance of both. The spiritual processor. The spiritual processors are people who are addicted to the processing of emotional trauma. Like, you never get past the emotional phase. It's always like, you can be very good at emotions. You can be sharing, crying, or, you know, whatever, and then just processing it and processing it and processing it. You actually, you know, that can be a phase where you kind of get addicted into the actual process itself. And then, you know, you get to the end. You never quite make it past the letting go of that and into the learning of the lesson, and then the transcendence and the gratitude that comes after that process. So it's easy. It's another way in which unconsciously we can get hooked into patterns that keep us from going fully into the next layer of the trauma. You know, so we get caught in these loops, but we never actually dig deep into the trauma. And therapists and healers out there will probably recognize this one in people. And often those people, if they come to you, they need help, just a little bit of a push to pull them a little bit past that loop that you can get caught in, you know, of the emotions. So another potential trap. The spiritual know-it-all, of course, this is me, because I've written this long checklist. You know, the problem with the spiritual know-it-all is often they're the one that has no opinions of their own. You know, they're trying to maintain spiritual objectivity, but in fact, they're really a little bit disengaged. You know, so they haven't, you know, they're kind of trying to maintain this kind of safe place, often quite intellectual, you know, often can feel a bit superior. And if you challenge them, they'll be very defensive, you know, because they have a well-built citadel of knowledge. And, you know, like many of these patterns, such a person is not able to be vulnerable very easily, you know, and that's a real kind of edge. Like if someone can be vulnerable and strong at the same time, you know, that's a powerful place to be. You know, that person is not in a trap. You know, if you really feel that tremor of that vulnerability, and that's a good kind of sign for any of these patterns, that if you can open up and be vulnerable and own the pattern, then that's a way of breaking the pattern. All right, almost through. So finally, one more, you know, to end, which is the one I call spiritual succeeder. It's the final one, spiritual succeeder. The spiritual succeeder is the person that's got there, you know. I am enlightened. I am a master. You know, a master never calls themselves a master, by the way. You know, others will call them a master, but they will never call themselves a master. You know, again, it's the Advaita veneer. You know, I've decided to stop being a seeker. You know, you have to exhaust seeking to stop being a seeker. You can't pretend that exhaustion. You know, so otherwise you're looking at everyone else and you're seeing that you're looking down on seekers in a way. You're a bit superior to all seekers because you've found it. You know, it's stopped for you. And you've created a duality, a superiority. You know, there's the awakened people and there's the asleep people. There's people living their design, there's people not living their design. There's people in their shadow, there's people not in their shadow. You know, it's all division. You know, and I want to finish by saying, you know, we are all the children of God. You know, we never stop growing, we never stop changing, we never stop evolving. Consciousness itself doesn't evolve. It can't. It's perfect. But awareness evolves. Awareness, these forms. So be careful about pretending or believing that there's an end or there's a way out. You know, up and out. Enlightenment is not something that is attained, but it's also not something that's not attained, if you know what I mean. Wherever you go, there's a trap. You know, there's a great book by Trungpa, Spiritual Materialism, and I read it when I was younger. It's an uncomfortable book to read, but really good. And one of the things that he mentions about is success. You know, beware of success. You know, and beware of knowing stuff. You know, you don't use this list, for example, this checklist, to point out to others where they're stuck. You know, this is not to be weaponized. This is only for you. This is for me. Yes, you might spot one of these patterns in your life, but you need to be so careful because it can so easily, anything spiritual can be made into a dogma, or it can be imposed on others, or you use it to talk about someone else behind their back, or even you keep it quietly to yourself, but subtly you know that they're in that pattern. You know, whatever you do, there you are, the narcissist. You know, whatever you do, you're damned. So the line is always so fine. And the real purpose of this discussion, of this checklist, of all these ideas, is so that the more refined layers of awareness that we have, the subtler our ego can also become. So use these ideas as a mirror, and you can forget about all of this actually, but just if you're inspired just to look a bit deeper at yourself and see some of these roles, and all these roles are just wonderful costumes in the great drama. They're no different from the costumes of people not on a spiritual path. You know, it's like they're no different from the people in the world, and there are saints and there are sinners and there are, you know, janitors and there are kings and there are, you know, all kinds of different costumes that humans wear. you know, and it's no different. You know, every costume and, you know, that we wear has its, you know, has its kind of, I don't know, it's perfection. So the most important thing is just to interact with others with integrity, you know, and so these insights can help you to become more compassionate, especially if you see the ones inside yourself. And we get to a stage of spiritual evolution where, you know, really the only thing that can help us is the heart. You know, because the moment we project blame or we project a label onto something or someone, the heart contracts. So use this list wisely, lightly, as a checklist for your own spiritual ego. And know that above all, the only thing that protects us from a spiritual ego is our hearts. It's love. You know, self-love. A tender heart, a compassionate view of the world. So be gentle with yourself. You know, that's my creed. Be gentle with yourself. It's the only thing I've personally found to truly and unequivocally mitigate these many traps of the ego. And it's so simple. You know, simplicity, patience, gentleness. These are wonderful guides on the path of self-inquiry and deep contemplation. You know, I've got a lovely quote from Vivekananda: have as many faces as you can for a full enjoyment of life. You know, so what he's saying there is try all these, find them in yourself, see them in others, you know, and then let them go. You know, we're not here to kind of be perfect. You know, we're here to be perfectly imperfect. So all of this is just, I hope, fuel for gentleness towards yourself, to remind you that the only thing you can do is open your heart and soften your heart. That's the only way you're going to get past this, you know, and the only way that you're going to be able to, you know, open to the deep awakening that is embedded in your body and your soul. So thank you for bearing with me as we went through this mammoth checklist, and I hope it's of use to you, and many, many blessings to you, whoever you are, wherever you are watching this. Thank you. So I'd like to talk today about the shadow, what we call in GENEKEYS the shadow, and what it means to transform one's shadow. What do we mean by that? It sounds very simple. And in fact, it is the very essence of this entire work